I mean, we already have Captain Usopp, Soga King, and regular Usopp, so at this point, Father, Son, Holy Ghost?
Flamin' hot Usopp.
Flamin' hot! Cool Ranch Usopp. Full Metal Usopp. Full Metal Usopp.
These are my pickle-flavored Usopps. Nobody wants to eat them at the party, which means there's more for me.
Welcome to our scariest season. The dead are here, they don't listen to reason. The Straw Hats arrive on the spookiest island. Zombies are dancing and spirits are flying.
Watch out! There's an invisible beast!
Watch out! The secrets go so deep.
The feeling in your throat is a worried scream. Could this nightmare be more than a dream? I'll try to keep our wits about us. Skeletons and samurai, what's the fuss?
Watch out! They're gonna come for your soul. Watch out! They've got a demon on call. Let's all hope that we survive as we travel on through season 5. Did you hear that sound? We gotta go, 'cause now it's time for us to start the show.
Season 5 King of the What Now?
Hello, fellow spooked adventurers of the Grand Line, and welcome to episode 92 of King of the What Now? We're a One Piece anime discussion podcast starting from the very beginning. I'm your host, Joel, and I briefly had my life flash before my eyes when I thought a giant was going to pummel me with his fist, but then at the last minute he realized he had somewhere else to be and just kind of left. So I was scared. I'm okay. Joining me, as always, is my dorky wife.
Oh, oof. Man, I am the empty shell of a swordsman who has caught who has caught a flame from that cut you just gave to me.
Oh, jeez. Are you going to be okay? Are you going to... Okay, no, your shadow's just going to pass out of your body and back to its original host.
Yeah,
that makes sense.
I'm going to force ghost away into the night. I'm Kat. I'm the ghost of the show. Hello.
Yeah, absolutely. And we just finished watching some episodes of the anime, but quickly, let's go into chatting with the hosts, because there's one show in particular that we watched outside of stuff for podcasting that Catherine and I are just super excited to talk about. Kaguya Sama, Love is War Season 2 is now airing, and
for some reason I thought you were going to talk about Westworld, and I went, are you really excited to talk about that?
Oh,
really?
Yeah, Westworld's a thing. If you like it, hit up Kat on Twitter. I liked the first season the best of the 3 seasons, and I didn't even like season 1 that well. And then the other 2 seasons that have come after have been largely disappointing to me, honestly. But
Kaguya Sama, we are very positive
support the things that you love, and I love this show. I don't know what it is about the characters. I don't know if I've secretly been craving comedy shows or slice of life shows my entire life, but I've only been watching shonen, but I just love their character interactions. They had an episode where, because the main 4 characters are all part of the student council, and they have an episode where the student council is being disbanded because it's only a 1-year thing and whatever, and they're leaving, and they have like a flashback montage of like the 12 episodes from the previous season and even a couple of episodes from that season, and it affected me. It really works.
Mm-hmm. No, it's an excellent series. I love it a lot.
Do you have a favorite joke or a favorite segment from these episodes that comes to mind?
I really like Kaguya's maid when saying like, you didn't used to be this stupid, when Kaguya is scheming on how she's gonna do something for the president for his birthday. Also, she makes him a cake, and
not Sayaka, not the maid.
No, Kaguya makes her love interest a cake, and this thing is like the size of a wedding cake. It's as tall as she is. It's huge, and she's thinking about it because Sayaka was like, this is a horrible idea, and she goes, Chica had a birthday cake at her party, and she thinks about it a little more, and then it shows the size of Chica's cake, which was a regular cake, and then it shows, like, the Empire State Building and Godzilla, and then it shows her cake, like, towering over them, and she goes, it's not the same at all!
Oh, God, it's so good. Most of these jokes we're not going to be able to recreate as well. Just go watch it. It's on Funimation. I believe that the newest episode you have to be a subscriber, but the other ones are all free even if you don't have an account, and so it's super duper great. We are also continuing to watch Star, Twinkle, PreCure, and Kira PreCure, all in mode. That's too long for an episode or for a TV show title. What's wrong with them? Is it a light novel? But both of our shows are excellent, and I can't recommend these 2 series any higher.
Mm-hmm. I've been reading a new book I've been reading The Couple Next Door. It came very highly recommended, and it is okay. It's entirely written in the present tense, which throws me off quite a bit. I'm not used to that in books. And I would say the plot twists, I kind of picked up on what was happening. So I recently I finished Gone Girl, and I've just been binging other Gone Girl style books, looking for that same Gone Girl high. So if you have one you would recommend, hit me up.
And what is the Gone Girl style for anyone who's just unaware, who hasn't read them?
Unreliable narrator, mystery to solve, maybe there was a murder.
Okay. Do the people all have to be assholes, or is that...
They don't have to be, but I think that's a side effect of the genre.
I think it's conducive to it. Okay, yeah, absolutely.
You can't have an unreliable... Well, okay. I was gonna say you can't have an unreliable narrator who's not an asshole, but Girl on the Train's narrator was unreliable, and I don't think she was an asshole. I think she was just sad.
Oh, okay. Yeah, I mean, those are two very distinct things, but... I mean, we have a lot of fights to talk about, and that's some of the more exciting stuff in One Piece. So today's a relatively short Talking with the Hosts. I'm sure next episode we will have thoughts on the final season of She-Ra. It's now available, but we just haven't gotten around to it because we're producing content for you lovely people.
We are so dedicated to this podcast. All of our TV watching time is podcast stuff.
Yeah. Absolutely. So we just finished watching episodes 355 through 364, which I think is 10 episodes, even though it sounds like it should be 9. It doesn't matter. We watched a lot of episodes, and the succinct summary is thusly. Everyone goes off in order to try to accomplish the tasks of retrieving Sanji, Zoro, Luffy, and Brook's shadows, in addition to saving Nami from Absalom's clutches and the fake wedding. Oars is jumping around being an idiot, and he basically screws all of their plans to hell, and a bunch of people get knocked to places where they didn't want to be, but in the end, it's alright because they kind of regroup and rethink, and they continue onwards. Sanji goes to find Nami and has to fight Absalom in order to protect her. Usopp ends up being the only one who can defeat Perona for reasons we'll go into, not important to the succinct summary, but Usopp decides to take her on. Zoro saves Brook from Ryuma, and he steps in to fight Ryuma. Luffy, Chopper, and Robin meet up with Hogback and Cindry, and also Dogwin and Jigoro, the the zombies for Sanji.
I did not realize Zoro's zombie had a name.
Yeah, they've used his name twice, but that's it, and I literally only know it because I just wikied it before this episode. But Chopper basically is like, hey man, he's a doctor, I'm a doctor, it's gonna go down. Luffy goes, great, and he continues onward. Luffy ends up trying to fight Moria. Moria has a super secret power, the power of Doppelman. His shadow can fight independently of him, turn into bats, do all sorts of weird stuff. It doesn't feel pain, it doesn't take damage, it can reform after it's been defeated. So Luffy's having a real hard time. We also find out that all of the zombies, after they've been given their shadows, will eventually become 100% obedient to Moria. So although Dogwin was unable to kick Nami, and even though Oars was running around saying he's going to be king of the pirates, they all kind of snap out of it at the same time, and Oars is like, I've got to go serve my master. And Dogwin kicks Robin, which is, no good. All of those fights end, and Moria's like, hey, Oars, why didn't you take out the Straw Hats? And Oars goes, okay, and pretty quickly takes out most of the crew, like almost immediately. Sanji is caught in the crossfire, Chopper and Robin, I think, get dispersed because of it or something, and Hogback is just stepped on? Like, he might actually be dead, except, spoiler alert, he's not, but he should be. So things are looking bad. Luffy is not fighting Oars. Luffy is chasing after Moria, who's now doing the Scooby-Doo, run away type
I love
of thing.
how he's laughing as he's running. Like, this is just a great time for him. He's just screwing around.
Oh, God, he's a kid in a candy store, but the candy store is his own ship that is also an island. And then the last bit is that even though Sanji defeated Absalom, he came back and he stole Nami when Sanji was distracted, and now Nami is once again in the clutches of bad guys. So... great job, Sanji, I guess. Like, that's all I can say about that.
You had one flippin' job, and it was to kick a man in the face so hard he wouldn't get up again, and you failed.
Yeah, I mean, you kicked him so hard in the face that he didn't get up for like a second, but maybe he was faking it, so... And that has been your succinct summary.
That was a really good succinct summary.
Okay, I was going to ask you for like a grade on how well I did.
I'm going to give you like an A. I think you did a good job. So last week, listeners of the podcast, fellow adventurers of the Grand Line, I was like, I'm going to try to structure this episode a little more. But being the goofus that I am, I failed to write down the new, like, categories, like the sets of what we go through. So hopefully by the time we record next week, we will have edited that episode and we can write them down as we go. This week, I'm just going to try to remember them.
Yeah, I think we started with, like, any new or relevant information that we learned, and we didn't get very many new characters. We're done with the introductory stage, and now we're at the kick-ass stage, essentially. We found out that the Shadows eventually basically lose their previous memories.
And personality.
Well, they keep some personality, but not all of it, which might explain why Ryuma is so sour, or dour, or whatever the word is. We find out that Usopp is immune to the hollow powers, which is just wonderful. So, Catherine, can you describe that scene when they're in Perona's Wonder Garden or whatever it's called?
Yeah, I absolutely can. So her hollows pass through the crew, and, you know, they do the thing where they fall down on the ground. I don't think it was the whole crew. I think it was Zoro, Sanji, and Luffy. Was that it?
Luffy, maybe Frankie, and Usopp. Yeah, I think there were 4 or 5.
So it passes through them, and they fall down on the floor, but Usopp is still standing there. And Perona's like, oh no, I must have missed. So she does it again, and it does nothing. And she does it again and again, and she's freaking out. And Usopp starts laughing, and Usopp is like, the joke's on you, ma'am. You can't make me negative because I'm always negative. He tells the rest of the crew to go on ahead without him, and he
Sort of.
Perona.
He basically says, I can fight Perona if you guys can take care of the zombies, but by the time he said, I can take care of Perona, they're gone. He's like, no, don't leave me.
But, like, you're a great marksman, Usopp, so he just shoots some salt into the zombies' mouths, and it's fine.
Yeah, it ends up to his benefit, and there's some back and forth as to, like, at one point it looks like Usopp's winning, then it looks like Usopp's losing, then it looks like... So, you know, we can go more into details than that, but the essential idea is that we found out there is a counter to Perona's power, and it's Usopp specifically. So good luck if you're if you're Shanks' crew, if you're Buggy Clown's crew, if you're Crocodile, no one can stop her except for Usopp.
Yeah, exactly. We also found out a little bit more about how her powers work in the course of this fight. So she can remove herself from her body.
Astral project, more or less.
Yeah, she can float around, she can make herself appear bigger or smaller. The hollows she create can explode.
She has a specific one that does that, yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, the mini hollows can explode. Or she can combine all the mini hollows into a really big one that makes a giant explosion.
Yeah.
Why do you think ghosts and explosions are related?
Because Usopp needed to be driven into a corner. Like, I legitimately cannot understand the logic of she can create ghosts, they can depress people's spirits, okay, and they can explode. I don't know. Devil fruit powers are strange and mysterious, and who knows? Mm-hmm. But yeah, I don't quite understand where that comes from. But it's interesting because a lot of times thematically, okay, not a lot of times, in any media, whether it's a movie or a TV show or an anime, a physical fight usually also has to have some kind of a philosophy behind it. Like, what are these two people actually fighting for? And so Usopp fighting Perona, at first you think that it's because he has to be the one to fight her, but it turns out her becoming bigger and smaller and exploding and all that stuff, she's a trickster as well, so it's thematically a better fit for him than I would have assumed at the beginning of the arc, and so I like that.
I really enjoy this fight. I enjoy their interactions. Yes. At one point, Perona and some of the zombies try to cheer him up. They, like, give him a thumbs up and go, it's not that bad.
Yeah, he's basically like, frig off, lady.
Yeah, they're so upset by how negative. We also had a brief Usopp Kumasi fight that we didn't really mention.
Sure, yeah, absolutely.
And it was very brief, but Usopp eventually just, like, sprung up onto this bear and shoved a salt in his mouth.
No, I don't remember Usopp doing any of that. I think Usopp was on the ground. I think his good friend Soga King showed up and saved the day. So that's wonderful.
You got me. Usopp asked Soga King for help, and Soga King helped him.
Here's the thing about Soga King. In Water 7, Usopp put on the mask. Usopp was Soga King? But Usopp puts on the mask, and it was sort of like I'm not on the crew, but I want to help the crew. I'm sort of stuck in this position, but I don't want to reveal it's me sort of thing. Okay, that all makes sense. In this situation, though, it's literally Usopp getting the crap beaten out of him, and he goes, save me, Soga King, puts on the mask and he gets really, like, more athletic, I guess.
More confident.
And then he's like, I can't defeat Perona, because at this point he doesn't realize that the ghost and her body are two separate things. So he's basically like, my attacks can't hit her. So he starts running, and he literally has an inner monologue that's him and Soga King, where Soga King is like, you can do this, man. And Usopp goes, hell yeah, I'm gonna fight. And so the first time we see Soga King, it's like, okay, he created this mass personality because he's a fan of Toku and superheroes and comic books and stuff. But this time it really does feel more dissociative, and I think that's interesting, and I wonder if it's going to come to a head in the future.
Yeah, for sure. I really think that a big part of the conflict between Usopp and Luffy in Water 7 was that Usopp saw the Mary as a crewmate, and Luffy said, this crewmate isn't strong enough to continue traveling with us, so we're going to leave her behind. And to Usopp, who is one of the weaker members of the crew, well, when are you going to leave me behind? Because I'm not strong enough. So he fought for that, and when he lost that fight, he had to create a personality that was stronger than him, that he could put all of his bravery into. And so I think he's carrying that with him, and Soga King to him represents strength and courage.
No, I absolutely get it. I'm saying he did not have a conversation with Soga King about, let's strategize, Soga King. Okay, Usopp, I think that this is the best. Like, it seems like an evolution or a new fold in that kind of the Soga King dynamic. I think we got a little distracted, though. We also found out that Hogback is gross and stupid, and I hate him. We find out, so, you know, what's the deal with Cindry? Dr. Hogback says that he's creating zombies, but Cindry is dead, so that can't be the same Cindry, even though he just said he was working on zombies. So it turns out he decided to work for Moria because, A, he hated, like, poor people and desperate people coming to him for help. He got tired of helping them because he just wanted money.
Yeah, he was a doctor because he was a genius, and he wanted people to notice his genius.
Yeah, absolutely. So he both wanted to get away from all of those people, but he also, when Moria was like, hey, I can bring corpses back to life, he was like, dude, I love Cindry, so can we bring her back? And that's what happened. Now, it turns out that he was in love with Cindry, and she did not acknowledge his advances because she already had a husband. So he, like the rational person he is, he's basically an incel, decides that, you know, she's a jerk, she's a bitch, and he wants to control her. And he's delighted by the fact that he now has her Mario, even though I guess maybe you could call it a Moria. It's a woman's body. But anyways, he has this obedient zombie that will follow his every command. And that's his thematic battle against Chopper, is he doesn't see Cindry as a person, he sees her as a thing. And Chopper's like, you disgust me. I am going to punch you so hard in the face.
Right, and Chopper talks about how bringing someone back from the dead, even if people called it evil medicine, it would give people a chance to say the things to their loved ones that they always wanted to say. And of course that would be important to Chopper, whose father figure died after he fed him poison soup.
That is not something that I had even realized. That's a great connection.
And so I really appreciated that Chopper got a chance to talk about, like, why being a doctor is important to him and show his compassion for people. I don't feel like we get a lot of that from Chopper.
No, absolutely. I think that he is one of the kinder members of the crew as well. I think he and Sanji can often be depicted in that light, and I think that it works really well. I think that's about it for new stuff that we learned. We found out that the black blade that Ryuma carries is called Shusui. And I don't know if this is technically foreknowledge or not, but I will point out that Mihawk's blade Yoru, which literally just means night, I learned from Duolingo, that's great. But it also, he basically said, this is a black blade, which I don't think that's a description. I think it is a description.
It's a type of sword.
I think it's a type of sword, and it seems to be really kick-ass.
I have very specific ideas about the black blades, but I can't share them yet because it's based in foreknowledge. So in like 200 episodes, I just checked my watch. I don't know why I thought that would help me, but in like 200 episodes, we can talk about black blades a little more.
Yes, but the sword Shusui is a named blade. It's pretty cool, and it's going to come up again later in relation to the Wano country, whatever's going on with that, because it is a named sword. Like, Tashigi would know that sword immediately when she sees it.
You know what else came up? in these episodes in a couple of different places.
Go ahead.
Wills. Which, as we've mentioned before, inherited will is kind of a through line of this series. And Ryuma specifically mentions the sword kind of having a will. He says, this sword would be glad to have you as its master, which I think is important. And Chopper says, can a body still have a will even after the soul has left?
Yes, because they have like one of those the real you is inside of you cliche moments where he basically is like, Cindry, snap out of it. And she doesn't break the programming of the zombie shadow relationship exactly, but she does prevent herself from moving twice at critical moments or whatever. And it seems like, oh, maybe Cindry's will, because Cindry was a kind person who would not want to serve someone as nasty and vile as Hogback, was maybe fighting the urge to listen to those commands.
Yeah, absolutely. Can we just touch on something I noticed really quick about these episodes? Not these episodes in specific, but kind of a pattern in the show in general. We get on Araki's case a lot, the mangaka for JoJo, about how he uses violence toward dogs as shorthand for this is an evil person.
Yes.
And I only just realized in this episode that Oda kind of does the same thing with violence against women. Arlong and Spandam and Crocodile to a certain extent. He wasn't as bad, but the way he talked to Miss All Sunday. And now Hogback making Cindry lick the floor. Like, these scenes are all intended to show you, look, this guy's an asshole, but like, we already knew they were assholes.
I 100% agree that seems to be an easy shorthand. I will say that Hogback also specifically kicked Cindry, which to me is a more stronger violence against women. And I know the other thing is also abusive, but you can have a person who is like, I like control and I get off on controlling other people without it being violence against women. But kicking your female assistant, it's really hard to, avoid talking about that or anything. Or avoid seeing that as direct assault. And, I don't like it, personally. I think that it is effective in a certain degree, but you don't need it for Hogback, because Hogback could, just say, I see all zombies as puppets, get basically the same message across. And he already was talking about how he didn't want to help poor people because they couldn't give him money. So, like, he's evil enough. We believe that he's evil.
Right, exactly. And if we're supposed to believe that he's in love with this Cindry puppet, he was quote unquote in love with the original, but she didn't want to be with him. Would somebody who was like actually in love treat their person that way? No, I don't think so. And I know that's the point. Like he sees her as an object, not a person. But I still don't think that even an evil person would be kicking them around just to make a point to the enemy.
Yeah, for sure. There's also one other thing in the new information that we learned. It's blink and you miss it, but it's really interesting. And let me tell you, having now gotten farther in the manga than was available at the time, sirens went off in my head because Sanji mentions when he was a kid reading an encyclopedia of devil fruits. He knew that there was a fruit called the clear fruit, but he knew that it existed, and he also once again reiterated that no power can exist in two places at once. So if he met someone who had this power, that meant that he couldn't have it. So that's just really interesting, and for people who have foreknowledge of stuff that happens later in the series, why would Sanji have a devil fruit encyclopedia? That's very interesting. But I mean, we also found out Blackbeard was specifically looking for the Yami Yami no Mi, and he joined Whitebeard's crew because he figured that was going to be the best chance he had of running into it. So, I mean, of course there are tales of the devil fruits and whatever, but it being in an encyclopedia form specifically, we got those devil fruit botanists that Dak over at Piece Together is always talking about. Like, there is someone who is categorizing these things.
I think that's pretty cool. I desperately want to meet the person doing this, and I don't know if we're gonna.
Yeah.
Maybe. Oda's pretty good about putting something early on and then bringing it back hundreds of chapters or episodes later.
Yeah. I don't know if we necessarily need to meet whoever or whatever organization is doing the classification, but the idea that someone is studying them, I think, is going to be important. The origin of devil fruits, or how they affect people, or why you can't have more than one in a body, or other questions like that, they have to be answered. I don't know if the person doing it will matter, but definitely this is a thread that's going to be picked up later.
Absolutely.
Okay.
You know what I forgot to ask before I asked if there was any new information?
Okay, did I like these episodes?
Did you like these episodes?
I really liked these episodes for the most part. There were occasional parts where it's like, okay, yeah, you're just showing this again and again. Luffy versus Moria or Luffy versus Doppelman drags on a lot. It's a lot of, there's a bunch of bats. Luffy goes, bats! And he tries to punch them, and they go as they hit the ground. Like, that's the actual sound, and then they, like, fuse back into Doppelman.
They did reuse a bit of animation.
But no, I really like all of these fights. It feels like instead of having 9, enemy pirates or whatever, strong opponents, it looks like Ore is going to be like the big opponent that challenges the crew. And I think that makes sense because now you're getting fights that are more thematically interesting. Whereas like Sanji versus Chu is like, Chu doesn't really like Nami, but Sanji does like Nami. Or Frankie versus Fukuro, it's like, oh, they're both weird, I guess? I don't know. So I think that by dialing down the number of opponents, I think that they each had a really interesting kind of point to be made.
I think the Usopp Perona fight is one of the strongest Usopp moments in the entire series.
Absolutely.
And it certainly is one of the most enjoyable fights to watch.
Yep, absolutely.
I haven't made a huge secret that fights aren't necessarily my favorite part of watching Battle Shonen, which seems kind of silly and contradictory. But no, what I really like about this genre is the characters and the friendship and all of that. And so for me, a lot of times I'm just kind of like sitting through battles waiting for them to be over. But this one was good. And I was engaged the whole time.
Well, and it shows the duality of Usopp. One thing that a lot of people I've seen discourse on talk about is, Usopp is so cowardly and Usopp's so weak, but he is and he isn't at the same time. He wants to be a brave warrior of the sea, but he's scared of everything. He's scared of everything, but he's also faced incredibly dangerous threats before. And so you get this, like, the crew's depending on me, but then you also get him hiding from General Mr. Hippo with a mustache because, like, oh, he'd kill me even though I just took out the person who commands him, Like, Usopp has kind of two sides of his personality, and both of them are on display here and at war.
We've talked before about how Usopp is the most human member of the crew. Yeah. And, like, honestly, the way he reacts in these situations that he gets thrown into are more in line with what I would expect a real person to react like.
Yeah, exactly.
So with that in mind, like, he's doing his best and he's doing a phenomenal job. I don't know if I would perform as well under the same circumstances.
Yeah, for sure.
I also really enjoyed the Zoro Ryuma fight.
Oh god, it's so good.
Visually alone, it was really enjoyable to watch, but Frankie not really being able to follow what they're doing because he's not a swordsman, and Brook being able to follow it, but just being in awe because he's never been that level of swordsman was really cool. They can run up walls. That's how intense their swordsman spirit is.
That's just how physically strong they are, I think. I don't think that has to do with their sword abilities, but no, it's a really good fight, and I really love, there's a part near the beginning of the battle. It starts out in the lab, I think, or one of the inside rooms, but then they end up fighting on the roof outside, and that's where it has its climax. That's where it finishes. But when they're still inside this room, there's a part where Ryuma does like a fencing thrust at Zoro, and Zoro ducks out of the way, and a hole appears in the wall. Like he shot like a cannon or a pistol, and it's a perfectly round hole. And Frankie's like, the hell is that? And Brook's like, oh, it was the pressure of the shockwave. He thrust so hard that the air blew apart. And you're like, wow, that's anime logic, but it's anime logic that I love. But then Ryuma and Zoro are looking at each other, and Zoro goes, I guess it's a draw. And Ryuma goes, I guess so. And this giant gash appears behind Ryuma, and Frankie and Brook are like, what the hell? Or maybe Brook has an idea of what's going on, but Frankie's like, what is going on? And it turns out Zoro launched his counterattack at nearly the precise same moment, and so they attacked him. Oh, that's so good.
It was extremely cool. I do really quickly want to touch on this idea that's come up previously in the show, specifically for Zoro and Luffy, I feel, more than anyone else. But usually they are very opposed to interfering in other people's fights. So I'm curious as to why Zoro was okay taking over this duel that really should have been like a matter of honor for Brook.
Clock's ticking, baby, Brook has tried to get his shadow back, and he's had 5 years, and he hasn't gotten anywhere. Luffy said, we're gonna get our crewmate's shadow back, and Zoro went, okay. There's also, I think, a little bit of kind of like arrogance or hubris in there. Like, Zoro wants to prove that he's strong enough to fight this legendary swordsman, so maybe his personal interest is stepping in for it. But I mean, also realistically, the fight is over. Brooke was about to die when Zoro showed up.
Brooke had given up and, like, explicitly asked for help, so
Right.
you're right.
So I don't think it's necessarily... I think what it is Zoro and Luffy and their honor system are against the idea of mid-battle coming in and trying to hit an opponent from behind while they're distracted fighting Sanji or something like that. Because, like, that's cheap and that you know... It muddies the water. But I think if one of them says, please help, I couldn't defeat this opponent, I think, you know, Nami stepped in for Sanji back at Water 7, you know, if you really think about it, so.
Okay, yeah, that's true. God, Brooke is so good. I love him celebrating that his shadow is back, and he's like, look, it's copying everything I do. Yeah, Brooke, that's how shadows work, you baby.
Oh, and there's a part when I wish that this were a continuous thing, but Frankie says something about, like, I'll shave your afro, skeleton. He's like, no, please don't, even though clearly Frankie is one of the most invested in the afro and the safe, emotional journey of Brooke, but he still gets mad enough to be like, I'm gonna fucking cut your hair.
Oh, gosh, yes. Did you have any other favorite moments or quotes from these episodes?
Yeah, so I think we need to go more in depth into the Sanji Absalom stuff because there's a couple of levels to that, but there's a part when Absalom is turned invisible and Sanji's on the ground and he grabs Absalom's foot and Absalom's like, let me go. And Sanji has this almost deranged look in his eyes where because we found out that Absalom apparently has been medically altered by Hogback to have, like, the hide of an elephant and the strength of a gorilla and the speed of and so Sanji's holding onto him and he goes, you're a mix of a bunch of different animals. I bet you'll make lovely mincemeat. And just, that quote I don't think would be badass if you told it to someone who A, didn't watch anime at all, or B, didn't watch One Piece. But for us who have gone through, 360 something episodes with him, that's one of the most badass lines that Sanji could possibly deliver.
Yeah.
For him specifically. It wouldn't work for Zoro.
No, that was fantastic. Another really excellent Sanji moment from these episodes that I really appreciate is Absalom stabs him at one point during their fight. And this whole fight, Sanji has been, like, cradling Nami and protecting her, but he finally drops her and he says, I'm sorry, Nami. And Absalom's like, oh, you finally tried to protect yourself from a blow? And Sanji's like, no, I couldn't bear to get blood on her beautiful dress.
Yes! Okay, so this is just going to be the Sanji Absalom section of the episode. I enjoy this battle for what it is. It is not a high-stakes battle. It's not cinematographic. It's cinema. Anyways, Zoro and Ryuma is very fluid and it's beautiful to watch. It truly is. Hogback and Chopper is very emotionally resonant, you know, because Hogback is a dick and Chopper is talking about human will and that sort of thing. And Usopp is a personal journey where he's trying to overcome his own, you know, fears and he's trying to defeat an opponent that seems undefeatable. Indefeatable? Who cannot be defeated. But Sanji's battle is also interesting in a couple of different ways. One, I love his entrance. They're in the wedding altar and, like, debris is rumbling around them. And Sanji is, like, literally skipping past all of these zombies at the wedding procession being like, Nami Swan, Nami Swan, Nam. And then he just kicks one of the zombies so hard they go through the wall. He's like, give her back as he catches her, which is great. Sanji keeps looking at Nami and being like, oh, I thought I rescued a fairy, but no, this is Nami. She just looks so beautiful. I captured a fairy. And, like, yes, I understand how some people could read into that as, like, misogyny or he's treating her as an object, but, like, I truly believe that Sanji is the sort of person to think that, like, all women are queens, and here we get to see him just, like, literally so in awe of her beauty that, like, his brain goes, this isn't Nami, it's a goddess. No, it's Nami. And even Absalom does it too. Absalom looks over, he's like, oh, I thought that she was
an angel?
Yeah, exactly. I find it very interesting that Oda found a way to have Sanji and Absalom have kind of a personal beef with each other over, you ate the fruit that I wanted. And, like, okay, I understand why some people would not like the idea of a main character or a protagonist or a heroic character wanting to peep on women's baths, right? Or seeing women without their consent. That is gross if you think about it. Sanji is basically mentally 12, and I think that everyone at some point in their lives thinks, oh, what if I could turn invisible? Ooh, I could use that for reasons. And it's just a fantasy, and most of us grow out of it, so I do understand why it'd be frustrating. But it is also kind of funny that he has a personal beef with Absalom for something that Absalom had no control over. And also, him trying to be like, think of all the things you could do to help humanity. Peep in the woman's bath. Think of all the way that you could save people. Peep in the woman's bath. And I love the commentators that are watching this. There's 2 zombies that, like, aren't fighting, that are just like, oh, he's just a pervert. And then Absalom says something and Sanji's like, you're a pervert too. And the zombies go, oh, he has a point. So I just love this little commentator zombie guys.
No, it's excellent. Well, and so anime and cartoons in general can get away with exaggerating things for humor or for emotional impact, right? If Sanji were a real person who was mourning the loss of the opportunity to peep on women's baths, that would be gross. But Sanji is not a real person. Sanji is an exaggerated caricature of a person in an anime where all of the character traits are very exaggerated. And so to me, I just thought this scene was funny.
Yeah.
It would be less funny if we actually saw him successfully peeping on a women's bath. At that point, I would be like, was this necessary to include, Oda?
Sure. Yeah, absolutely. And it seems like a lot of the times when he does something like, oh my god, Nami, you're so beautiful, I wish that I could hug you for 3 straight days, like, she doesn't ever really seem to very much object, which, I mean...
She is being written by...
Well, no, what I'm trying to say is there's a difference between affirmative consent and then just, like, not saying no, but I do think that if she explicitly was like, Sanji, you're a creep, and then he kept doing it, that's, like, the worst possible possibility. And the best possible possibility, I suppose, would her being like, oh, it flatters me. But her just kind of being like, he's being an idiot. It's the middle ground. It's not the worst for Sanji. It's not the best scenario, but it does also kind of explain it a little bit.
Can I be a little silly for a second?
Yeah.
Brooke is the ultimate champion of women's rights because he does ask to see their panties, but he's asking. He's not, like, taking upskirt shots without their consent. And when they say no, he stops asking. He moves on to the next person.
I see. Yeah, you know what? Absolutely.
Brooke, defender of women's rights. Thanks to him, women everywhere are safe.
Yes. But, I mean, the other thing, too, is Absalom turns invisible, and Sanji uses the salt that Usopp gave him in order to find him, and it's just, it's so good. And you already mentioned the quote about, like, Nami, your dress is so beautiful, I couldn't get any blood on it. I don't care how many people dislike Sanji, I don't care how many people love Sanji. I personally love that quote, and it's one of my favorite moments of seeing that Sanji, to me, personally does care about the women on the group. It's not just like, oh man, maybe I could touch their butt.
Yeah, it's funny too, because when we first met, which was 10 years ago, so we were both much younger, our views have
about 10 years younger, I would say, probably, yeah.
You're funny. Anyway, my point was that, you grow and change your ideas on things as you get older. But back when we first started watching this together, I had read someone's hot take about why Sanji is a terrible person and a misogynist, and I was telling you about this, and you went, no, there's that scene of him not wanting to get blood on Nami's dress, and that's beautiful. And I really do think that stands out as an example of Sanji genuinely loving women, not just objectifying them or whatever.
Yeah. Well, and it gets tricky because if you say this woman's a womanizer or whatever, if you say this character has flaw X, and you can say, look, there's a counterexample here in episode 1, season 2, or whatever. If there's only the one example, it gets tricky because some people would say, well, the author only put it in there so you could point to it as a counterexample to the criticisms. And, I mean, we could do an entire episode about, like, what about this thing that Sanji did? What about this one? What about this? What about his upbringing? What about this and that and the other thing? I like this fight. I understand why some people might dislike his women's bath, but like you said, it's just a caricature and that sort of thing. I do find it also a little strange that Sanji was like, I'm gonna save Nami, and then she got kidnapped again, and I mean, that's not exactly his fault. I guess maybe he could have, like, ran out of the room as soon as he had her, or he could have, like, kept his eye on Absalom or tied him up or something, but it's frustrating that in a shonen battle series, he clearly won. They didn't show, like, Absalom, like, snickering, like, I tricked him. It just, he took Nami, possibly just for filler, maybe? I don't know.
The most annoying part of that to me is that Sanji's supposed to be one of the smarter members of the crew. So, like, he's standing there holding Nami and she disappears, and then he realizes he's not holding her anymore, which shouldn't have taken more than a second for him to realize, and he's like, what happened? Where did she go? You just fought a guy who turns stuff invisible, Sanji. Like, why are you brain dead all of a sudden? So that was a little frustrating for me. But in general, I like this fight a lot. Like you always like to say, when Sanji is at his best, he is incredible, and I think that this highlighted some of his better moments.
Absolutely. Let me circle back to Usopp and Soga King and Perona and all that. We get the return of the Usopp hammer. The last time he had the 5-ton hammer back in Alabasta against Miss Merry Christmas and Mr. Four. This time he has a 10-ton hammer. So he figures out that Perona's body is prone and defenseless, and he fires a shot at the body, and Perona's like, oh, it's just a dud, because it doesn't seem to do anything. But then later in the fight, when she goes back into her body, it was actually like bubblegum or something, so her hand was like stuck to the ground and she couldn't move. Good on you, Usopp.
It had the power, or the properties of both rubber and gum.
Goodness gracious. But, so, first off, she's stuck in the gum, then he fires another shot, and it releases a bunch of, like, cockroaches on her body, and she starts freaking out, and then he pulls out the 10-ton hammer, and he really works at lifting it, and then he smashes it over her head, and she's like, please, no, that'll actually kill me, and right before it hits her, she passes out from fear, and then it turns out it's just an inflatable toy, and he's just a really good actor. And I have to admit, when I was first watching this series back in the day, there was actually a part of me that was like, okay, this is obviously a joke because all of Usopp's attacks are tricks. And the last time he did the hammer thing, it was 5 tons and that was a fake. But then some part of me was like, but he has been getting stronger. The crew has been getting stronger and he survives falls from these crazy distances or whatever. Maybe it's real this time. Maybe it actually is. And then it exploded and I went, God, Joel, you're an idiot.
I do love the look on Usopp's face when he goes, geez, she got really worked up over some fake bugs and a balloon hammer.
Oh, yeah.
Usopp, you did that on purpose. Like, why are you shocked that it worked?
I also think it's interesting that it's not exactly explicit, but it's pretty implicit throughout One Piece that men are not allowed to attack women, and I don't think they had that rule in the first episode when Luffy punched Alvida, but maybe it didn't count because she's not traditionally beautiful. But Usopp clearly could have launched some kind of like knockout gas star or something and made it so that she couldn't wake back up again, or he could have like done actual damage to Perona, but instead he decided to stick her to a place, creep her out, scare her, rather than
do you
taking
think
a shot.
That's related to like biases from Oda himself, or do you think that's a social thing? Like Jump magazine is like, you can't have men beat. No, that's not it, because Hogback straight up kicks Cindry in the face.
But that's a villainous character, so I don't know. I would be willing to believe if someone was like, yeah, I heard that the Jump editor said, you can't show men attacking women unless they're villains. I would believe that. I don't know if that's true, and I suspect that is true just based off of the fact that Luffy versus Alvida happened, but then later you have other examples of other characters being like, I could never attack a woman. Are you sure? Because you seem like you're willing to fight anyone, but, whatever. It's an aside. I don't want to spend too much time on it, but I do think that it's telling that Usopp was directly trying to knock her out, scare her rather than actually defeat her. But maybe that's just a pun on the fact that like sometimes people are like, oh, you scared me half to death. Like maybe he scared her all the way to unconsciousness.
That's perfect. So while we're talking about favorite moments, can I just say I'm growing increasingly attached to Moria.
Okay.
I really love how this whole time Luffy is fighting his shadow, he's just like lazing about and laughing at Luffy because Luffy can't do anything, and Luffy's like, fight me yourself, and he's like, no, I don't think I will.
Eneru has a certain level of cockiness, and Crocodile have a certain level of cockiness. All the villains have a certain level of cockiness, but usually the big bads are cocky, and if you get on their bad side, they will attack and they'll immediately kill you type of thing. But Moria is just like lying around, just shooting the shit, just being like, I'm a lot closer to becoming king of the pirates, Luffy. Aren't you gonna kick my ass? Aren't you gonna this, that, or the other thing? And maybe we could have mentioned this in New Things That We Learned, but we found out that maybe Moria also has more to his backstory. I believe that you wrote down a quote for him.
Yes, long ago I was brimming with overconfidence and arrogance, but it didn't take me long to learn how important it is to have good subordinates.
Which, I mean, honestly, in a sense, does set him up for tragedy. Like, oh, Moria might have been stronger in his youth, but then he became disillusioned, much like Crocodile. But it also helps strengthen Luffy because, like, I didn't have strong subordinates. Luffy has Zoro and Sanji. The argument is invalid. It doesn't apply to our rubber captain because he's just great.
But no, I love him. Didn't you say at one point his catchphrase is, "You do it"?
Yes. According to the wiki, I believe that his catchphrase is something like, yeah, it's your problem, you do it. I don't know if he's actually said that line too many times in the anime. Maybe it's a difference between manga and anime. Maybe it's the subtitles translation. But yeah, he's very like, I will get oars to fight for me. Oh, there's the Afro man, the Afro skeleton is back. Hogback, Perona, you two take care of it. You know, Absalom, you do whatever you want, but make sure that you crush the Straw Hats. He doesn't fight himself, and Doppelman is like the perfect power to exemplify that. Oda is a genius in a lot of ways, and I think it's great that he came up with a way to have zombies that actually exist without traditional weaknesses, like a headshot wouldn't stop these zombies, although I'm sure it would. But also it can represent this man's laziness, and also it ties to other characters that we're going to learn about later in the series, and it's so good.
A lot of really good stuff here in general, yeah. How is Luffy going to defeat Moria? How does he get through the shadow? Does he just get a really big flashlight and that clears the shadow out?
Blood, sweat, and tears, you know? I believe that either Moria will have a secret weakness that we don't know about, much like the zombie seemed invincible and then we found out, salt and that sort of thing. And Perona's ghosts, they depress your spirits. But Usopp is the perfect counter. Either there's going to be a weakness that we don't know about related to the shadows, or Luffy is just going to punch harder or wear him down. And I mean, we haven't seen Luffy's new power-up attacks. We haven't seen Gear 2nd or Gear 3rd, so maybe the fight hasn't really started to begin with? Or maybe Moria will make a mistake. You know, maybe his power is undefeatable if he's smart about it, but maybe he will be goaded into something, or I don't know.
Yeah.
Maybe they'll convince Oars to squish him flat, you know?
He'll go from pumpkin to pancake.
He'll go from pumpkin to a squash.
Babe, I love you.
I love you too. I do also really appreciate, so Luffy's trying to attack Moria, and Moria keeps being like, Doppelman's gonna stop you, man. Doppelman can reform. But eventually, Luffy jumps off of the balcony that we're on, and Moria's like, what an idiot, what's he doing? And then Luffy stretches and attacks from below before the shadow can react, and kicks Moria literally in the ass, and launches him in the air, and he lands, and Moria's response is, ow, that hurt, you bastard! And Moria is such a child compared to the other big bads that we've had. He's very like, no, you do it! It's my turn with the Xbox, Mom!
Oh gosh, can you imagine Perona to Absalom? Absalom, Moria says it's my turn on the Xbox.
Moria, I still haven't beaten the level. You two figure it out.
I love it so much. Do you have any other predictions or theories on where things are going to go from here? It definitely seems like an Oars fight is coming, but whomstead of?
I don't, like, just without foreknowledge, consider how big and powerful Oars is, and just try to imagine anyone fighting that. Like, Zoro can cut buildings, you know, and that sort of thing, and Sanji can kick buildings, but, like, he's bigger than buildings. Like, he eclipses the mansion. So even if I didn't know how the next couple of episodes go down, it really seems like this is going to have to be a group effort, or a team-up effort at least. Like, maybe Zoro and Sanji together. But also, these people have been taking a lot of hits in these battles. Usopp was getting exploded. Robin got kicked by a dogwind thing. Chopper had, like, pieces of plate, like, stabbed into him.
Poor Chopper.
Sanji got stabbed. Zoro, you know, so, like, I really don't know, even if everyone was at their strongest, how they would fight someone like Oars, but right now they are not at their strongest.
I agree with you. I think it's going to be a group thing. Probably the crew versus Oars, while Luffy continues to chase Moria around, and Moria's like, I'm running away!
And maybe in some unknown way, their fights will help each other. Maybe by the Straw Hats taking out Oars, Moria won't be able to be like, Oars, protect me! Or maybe by Luffy punching Moria really hard, maybe Oars will temporarily, like, blue screen right at a critical moment when Zoro's trying to, like, cut its head off or something.
Totally, I like that. Well, and what I was going to say was, I agree that I think it's going to be a group thing, but if I had to pick a single Straw Hat to fight him, I actually really like the idea of it being Robin.
Okay.
For a couple of reasons. One, he's a giant, which we know she has an emotional connection to because of Saul.
Okay.
Also, being an archaeologist, imagine finding this giant amongst giants and unearthing him from the ice and figuring out what his story is.
Oh, okay. That's very interesting.
That seems like something that would be important to her. And then also, powers-wise, she can make, like, lots of hands that, like, wrap around his legs and trip him up. How else are they going to get him to fall over? And how do you fight somebody that big if they're upright?
Yeah. At the same time, though, I think that there might be a limit to the number of limbs that she can create, and he might just be big enough that she can't create enough. I don't know. Without using foreknowledge, I would have no idea what was coming next, and I would just, I don't know.
Do you think anybody else would be as interesting as a one-on-one fight for him, though?
I mean, I could see Zoro being like, by the end of this fight, I'll learn how to cut a thing that big.
I'll learn how to cut a mountain.
Yeah, exactly. But I also really enjoy maybe Frankie building something that can go toe-to-toe with a giant this big. But then I also like Usopp being a tricky, like he sets up a series of traps Batman style that ultimately leads to him falling in the ocean and water gets in his mouth. Because then that would have been cleverly foreshadowed by Heilin being like, what if salt water had gone in your mouth?
I love that. What if the Sunny has a secret, and that secret is that the Sunny can be a mech? And that the Straw Hats can pilot it, and it transforms, and Mech Sunny fights Ors.
The Sunny as a mech is definitely something we're going to see by the end of the series. I guarantee it, with how obsessive Frankie is about it, with the increased team-up battles that we're going to see going forward, with there's just a lot of enemies that are giant in different circumstances.
There's also a lot of Sentai references throughout the series. Not as many where we are now, but they start coming and they don't stop coming.
You gotta hit the ground running. One thing I do want to point out, I meant to mention this last episode. Everyone except for Perona, for obvious reasons, have scars and they've had medical procedures done on them. Moria literally seems to have had his head cut in half at one point and it's all sewn up. And Hogback has one that kind of goes from the corners of his lips up over his eyes.
It's like a tiny circle on his head. His face looks too small for his head. It looks like they cut off his face and sewed on a new, smaller one.
Yes. And then Absalom has a bunch that we saw, especially after he took off his shirt, and oh man, it's getting hot in here. But it's interesting, and like I said, it's obvious why Perona doesn't have stitch marks, because she wouldn't agree to a medical procedure that would leave scars. But I wonder if that means that they have other powers. Absalom's scars come from all of the animal parts that were put inside of him, but Hogback didn't seem physically strong, so I don't know what he did to himself. And also, he had those scars before Moria recruited him to the team. But I'm wondering if, Moria's body shape is weird for a reason, and I'm wondering if maybe he has, secret bazookas in his nose or something because we haven't seen him fight seriously. We've only seen him being this will all blow over. So what happens if it turns out he has a secret final form?
What if Moria is actually some kind of snake or worm and the balloon shaped part of his body is literally just a balloon to make him look like a person?
I mean,
that's why he can't fight, because he doesn't have any fingers.
Oh,
but if he
okay.
makes a shadow with fingers, the shadow can use its fingers.
Okay, there you go.
I used fingers too many times.
Said
fingers.
Using fingers too many times is when you play video games and your hands are cramping. You're like, ooh, ow, can't use any more fingers.
The first time I ever played Smash Bros. On the GameCube, I button mashed so hard that I got a massive blister on my thumb from the joystick pushing it off to the side.
There were I don't know if there were actual lawsuits, but there were people getting injured during the original Mario Party because there was a game where you had to rotate the joystick and kids would jam their hands into the joystick and they'd hurt themselves from trying to do it so hard or whatever. So
gosh.
Yeah. But now we're moving on to the final segment of our episode before we bid you all adieu for the next leg of the journey. We reached out to people on Twitter, saw if anyone had any thoughts about these episodes, and we got the one response from Trey that was saying that Usopp versus Perona is his second favorite Usopp fight in the whole series, him being the direct counter to her and using his tricks again to fight. It has also been a first real fight against a villain in a while. That's true, because Usopp didn't really get a one-on-one fight in Skypiea. We didn't have really any fights except for Luffy against Bouncy Boy in Jaya. And in Enies Lobby, his contribution was shooting the keys from atop the thing. So we haven't gotten a one-on-one fight with Usopp. And actually, even in Alabasta, that was a 2-on-1 fight. So, geez, Usopp doesn't get 1-on-1 fights very often.
And I actually asked Trey, because to me, I feel like this fight against Perona was probably peak Usopp. I think this is one of his best moments in the series. And I asked Trey what he thought the best Usopp fight was, and he said Usopp versus Luffy.
Yes.
Which is definitely a very good fight.
For sure. Usopp has different parts of his personality. I mean, so do all characters. That's how people work. But, you know, him versus Luffy kind of showed the Batman side of him of, like, how much time does Usopp have to prepare and chaining together all these attacks. And he kind of did that in his battle against Perona, but that was more a matter of, like, how does he overtake opponents that are physically stronger than him? Oh, he momentarily anyways. And so, yeah, I do think that this might be my favorite Usopp fight in the entire series. Although I am looking forward to him being more of a sniper role in future episodes. I want a team-up fight where, like, maybe he and Zoro, for some reason, have to fight someone, and Zoro is doing the close-range stuff, and Usopp is doing the long-range stuff, and they have to coordinate and get the timing down right. Because if Usopp fires too soon, maybe he accidentally hits Zoro or something.
Like in that one movie, that would be awesome.
Yeah, exactly.
You know what would also be cool?
What's that?
If Usopp needed a better vantage to snipe someone from, and Zoro, like, cut him into the air.
I mean, yeah, absolutely.
Like, he took a running leap, and Zoro, like, fling with the flat of his blade on the bottom of Usopp's feet.
Yeah, for sure. Now, you have started following some people on Twitter who are very pro Sanji Usopp, which was not a ship that you or I had considered before we saw that there are some people on Twitter. So maybe I'm thinking of this the wrong way. Maybe it's not Usopp and Zoro, long range, short range. Maybe it's Usopp and Sanji because they're both sneaky boys. And because Sanji does canonically have a move that launches people. He used it for Zoro on the Davy Back fight. So maybe he could help Usopp get to a vantage point, or maybe they could be the schemers while Zoro and Luffy are on a berserker rage and they're just punching and slashing. So
I dig it.
I think that has been your final thought. Outro goes here. Thanks as always, everyone, for listening. And next episode, we will be covering episodes 365 through 374, which, if I understand it correctly, should be the climactic battles of Thriller Bark. So be sure to tune in. Thank you, everyone, and have a great day, evening, morning, night.
Wait!
Midnight hour, golden hour.
Last second, we got one more thought on Twitter.
Okay.
Our buddy James also said that Usopp and Perona was one of his favorite battles out of the arc. Beside the comedic elements in the fight and the fact that Usopp is already negative, it shows how well Usopp control his opponents and beat them without having to rely on physical strength alone. An amazing strength of Usopp. My favorite thing about the Usopp-Luffy fight was not that Usopp was physically able to take on Luffy, but that he knew Luffy so well he was able to plan out his attacks and his tricks to take advantage of Luffy's weaknesses.
Oh yeah, absolutely. We talk about Sanji at his best versus not at his best. And, I mean, every time a character enters a fight is a chance for them to show off their best, but Usopp's best just shines so brightly compared to some of the other characters. I'm not saying that I dislike the other characters. I just think that he has some of the most interesting nuance to his fights. Him and Nami, because they aren't as strong as Luffy, and they don't have blades or fire kicks or anything like that. So, yeah, absolutely great thought, James. I love it. I do also want to say, I forgot to mention this in reasons why I love the fight, he brought back the impact dial. There was the giant hollow that was going to explode. He's like, no, if you explode it, it'll kill me. But then when it explodes, it goes inside of his hand. Perona, who doesn't know about dials, is like, the hell is this?
That was so cool. I'm so glad Dials and Usopp and good. And that has been...
Your second final thought. Outro goes here, not that other place that I said earlier. Thanks for listening.
French toast. I was imagining the French toast sticks from Burger King. I just suddenly got a very intense taste memory.
Okay. I'm glad we got that on mic, because now I'm going to put that in no context into the episode, but I'm not sure what that was.
If Zoro... Okay, no. You know what? Listen, first I have to preface this with, they were running up walls, okay? And that's a Sonic the Hedgehog thing. Sonic the Hedgehog runs up walls. I explicitly remember that from Adventure 2 Battle. So with that out of the way, if Zoro is Sonic the Hedgehog, does that make Ryuma Shadow? I found you, faker! You're not even good enough to be my fake.
Not only is Ryuma the shadow equivalent, but Ryuma is himself a shadow. Oda couldn't be more explicit with this. But also, Zoro's color scheme is all wrong for Sonic. He's the weird crocodile guy. And also, Nami for Rouge? There was a rumor about town that you could see Nami's bust from space.
Uh-oh.
Haha! What a great episode of King of the What Now, your One Piece podcast that started from the very beginning and stars these two doofuses. If you want to follow us on social media, Twitter is the best place to do that. I am at KOTWN_pod.
And I am at Pirate Ghost Host.
Absolutely, yes. We share all sorts of thoughts on there, some related to the podcast, some related to other things. But you can also reach us through email at kingofthewhatpod@gmail.com, or you can also find us on Patreon. We would love some subscribers or supporters, whatever the technical term is. Patrons. So fancy and grown up. And you can find that at patreon.com/kingofthewhatpod. You can find all sorts of things like bonus episodes, and you get to see the full cold open candidates, not just the ones that make it into the episode. Maybe someday if I learn to draw, I'll put stuff up there. We're always looking for suggestions and feedback. And speaking of which,
please take a moment to rate and review our podcast wherever you get us from. So iTunes, Spotify, Scrivener, that's for writing. But wherever you listen to our podcast, take a moment to leave a review. It helps other people find us. We are so grateful to all of our listeners, and we couldn't do this without you.
Absolutely. Word of mouth is super powerful, so if you have a friend who likes One Piece and they haven't heard of us, just direct them to the latest episode. And if they hate us, they can tell us why. And if there's an actionable item, we'll try to please you. That's how this works. Thank you, everyone. Have a great day.